Hello there, I'm Andy Knox, and this is the second part of a two-part vlog series into health and well-being in society and whether or not we can really make a difference. And in the first vlog, I talked about the core determinants of health and actually how the health system itself has very little input into how healthy and well we are as society. And the fact that we're facing some major economic issues and we need to find a new way forward together that is socially just for humanity and also tackles the environmental crisis that we're facing. Now, in order to do that, it's going to mean not only do we need a new economy, but we need a new politics. Now, I mean politics with a small p, not a big P. I don't think any politician has an answer to the issues that we're facing, which is why we actually need a new kind of politics, which is about us together, the people, finding a new way forward. And that's what politics really is. Polis means the city. It means the people together. And actually, if you look at some of the crises that we're facing going into the future and some of the big things that determine how healthy and well that we really are, the truth is that we need to find a new way of being together, a new way of connecting together, a new way of being community together that brings us into a space where we can find a different kind of future. And that's politics. Politics is about people together finding a way forward, out of a foundation actually of love that is self-giving and others empowering, out of a place that is hopeful for a different kind of future. So I want to talk to you about social movement, and I'm shamelessly going to steal some slides from Helen Bevan from NHS England and her great work already done on social movements. And I'm going to talk about some of our experiences here in Morecambe Bay, about how we're trying to work differently with communities. So let me just recap that one of the fundamental principles for us here in Morecambe Bay comes out of the Poverty Truth Commission that means that no decision about me without me is for me. So we don't get to use power to do things to people or decide what communities need. We work with people to transform the future together. Some people call that ABCD, asset-based community development, which is something Cormac Russell is a great champion of. He's a fantastic guy. If you've never encountered his work, I would hugely recommend it. But I struggle with that terminology a little bit because if it's about assets, sometimes it feels a bit like we're using people. But actually, that's not what's at the heart of it at all. It's about finding people who've got amazing heart to make a huge difference in the community in which they live, and bringing them together with people who've maybe got positional power or authority to really begin to do something catalytic and transformational. And the other thing, which has been a huge part of our work here in Morecambe Bay, is what we call the art of hosting, which is a way of holding space for communities and people to come together and ask brilliant questions and then host different ways of holding conversations so that you can unpack and explore those together. And every single voice in the room matters. And you actually really find a way of opening up a conversation, really wrestling with the issues and coming down into a point of agreement and solution and action as to the way forward. Here in Morecambe, and Barrow and Carnforth and other places, we've been hosting these kind of community conversations, a way of bringing people together. And I was sat recently in a circle in Morecambe in which there was the Chief Inspector of Police sat next to a recovering heroin addict who was sat next to a town councillor who was sat next to a community artist who was sat next to a member of the community who just wanted to make a difference, sat next to a head teacher, sat next to the Chief of Nursing, sat next to someone who collects refuse from the streets. Amazing diversity in the room, but coming together around the question, how can we have better health and well-being together? How do we begin to transform some of the health inequalities that we're facing? How do we begin to tackle some of the issues around adverse childhood experiences and the things some of our kids are going through every day? And they've been some of the most rich and amazing conversations, partly because we take our lanyards off and we just come as the people that we are. And so you wouldn't actually know who was who in the room. It's just people with passion coming together to find a new way forward. asking really brilliant questions and holding space for something different to emerge. But you know, for social movement to happen, it really means that you have to be willing to deal with power issues and dynamics. And you also have to recognize that people start to get passionate about things, and often that passion comes out of a place of anger, a place of injustice, and actually rather than that turning into violence or revolution, it can actually be turned into passion or fire to create change for the better for everyone. And that's definitely what we're beginning to see here in Morecambe Bay. There's a fire in our bellies that things don't need to be the way that they are, nor can they be. But things can begin to change when people get together, build relationships, and give space to really begin to deal with the issues that we're facing. So a lady called Rebecca Solnit said this. She said that when we talk of social change, we talk of movements, a word that suggests vast groups of people walking together, leaving behind one way and travelling towards another. And some great work by Hari Hahn has also been done that says we do not become transformed alone. We become transformed when we're in relationship with others. And Richard Rohr says that actually relationship is everything. That in the beginning was the relationship. And actually relationship is what changes us. It's only in encountering someone who's completely other to us, completely different to us, and having the humility to really listen and be changed by them, just as they are changed by the encounter with us, that we begin to find a new way forward. And the problem is that we've become so siloed, we've become so encamped in our, oh no, I vote this way, no, I vote this way, no, I earn this much, no, I earn this much, I live here, no, I live here. And actually there's got to be a way in which we find each other, come together, encounter people who are different to us, and change together, recognizing that the future that we want to get to means that we go on a journey together. And if you look at the big changes that have happened in society over the last several hundred years, most of it has come through social movement. So look, this year, 100 years since the suffragettes. What an amazing movement, and so much more still to do. So much injustice still towards women in our society. The fact that we're still doing Me Too. It's a shock to us and should cause us as men and as society together to think very differently about the role of women in society and the injustice that is still there. Look at the civil rights movement and how much it's changed society, and yet how much more there is still to do. We only need to look at our prisons to know that there is still massive injustice towards people of black and ethnic minority here in Great Britain, the United States, all over the West, all over the world. We know that if we look at the LGBT movement, we know if we look at so many other things that have transformed society, it is because people together en masse have said, enough. Enough of this injustice, enough of this way of being. Let's find a new way forward together. And what's really exciting about social movements is that you don't actually have to get every single person in the room to make a change. Some great work that's gone on by a group called Connective, who are a think tank, and by Birmingham University, has shown that you actually only need 3% of your population to affect and infect 90% with the virus. That's amazing, because it sometimes feels overwhelming. You think, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to change society together? How are we going to tackle some of the health inequalities, some of the injustice that we're facing? How are we going to tackle the gap that is in terms of people's life expectancy here in Morecambe Bay, or the gross inequality we see worldwide? And the reality is 3%. If 3% of us begin to care enough together, we can change the world together. We can change it through the conversations we have at the dinner table, in the pub, round the school playground, in the universities, in our sitting rooms. Wherever we are, we can begin to infect other people with the same virus, that change is possible. We can keep hope alive and find that together we really can. So what partly that means, though, is that we begin to deal with the whole issue of power. Now, old power is the currency. It is held by a few, it is pushed down, it is top down, it is hierarchical, it is very command heavy, it is closed, and it is transactional. New power is completely transformational and different. And we need a different kind of power and to deal with our own issues of power in order to bring the transformational change that we really need to see. New power, rather than being currency, is current. Rather than being held by a few, it's held by the many. Rather than being pushed down from the top, it's pulled in and owned by everyone. Rather than being commanded, it is shared. Rather than being closed, it is open. And instead of being transactional, it is relationship. And you can see a brilliant TED talk by Jeremy Hymans when he talks about what new power looks like. Well worth exploring. So this diagram here comes from a fabulous piece of learning from the IHI, which is the Institute for Health Innovation, and it was particularly from Jason Leach and Derek Feely. And what they've talked about is the third curves of power and how we change things. The first curve is about keeping power. It's about control, it's about accountability, it's about making sure things get delivered. The second curve is about sharing power. It's about trying to recognize we're all involved perhaps in the change, but I kind of still get to keep the power. But the third one is ceding power. It's giving it away. And actually, power on its own is very, very dangerous. It's Martin Luther King who said that, right? Power without love is horrific. But love without power is anemic. Love and power together is what begins to transform the world. And that's what we need to get to, disruptive co-creation, in which we begin to say we don't want any more top-down hierarchical dominance, but nor do we want just a grassroots angry thing. We want something through the middle that cuts across the status quo and says we're going to find a new way together. We find a new power dynamic, a power dynamic built on love that helps us find a new future together as humanity. And so that takes cultural shift. We have to face the fact that we're losing. We're losing right now, but we don't have to keep losing. And so we need to take time to ask some very difficult but powerful questions and give space to the groan zone to find a new way through. And so here are some really basic questions for you. Who are you? Why are you here? What are your values? Who are you here to serve? What is your purpose? What questions do you have? Where in the world do those things need to manifest themselves? Because if you're not going to be part of it, if you're not going to be part of this social movement for change, who is? And if you're not going to be part of it now, then when might you be part of it? The urgency is now. The reality for our environment is now. The reality for socially just humanity is now. And we need to be part of a social movement for change together in which we recognize that no one voice, no one person, no one personality, no one organization holds the answers. Divided, we fall. Together, we find a future together. Together we can. And really, this is all about a healthier society or wellness for everyone on planet Earth, in which each person can live the fullest life possible for them. So we need love as our foundation to enable good neighborliness, humility and kindness at our core, hope in our hearts, and the audacity to be vulnerable as we pursue positive peace for the planet and the people who live here. The question that framed this couple of talks is whether or not we can actually make a difference together to the health and well-being of society. The answer is that we can, but we have to reframe the discussion. We have to rediscover one another, and it is in that context that together we can. Together we can be more healthy and well. Together, we can change the future. But we have to dig deep to these foundational issues of economy and politics and find a new way forward together that is good for the planet and good for the whole of humanity. Come be part of this social movement for change. We don't have the answers alone, but together we can.